Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of You're the Cure. I'm Dr. Ben Edwards. I have a very special show for you today. I don't know that I've ever done a show that I would call a tribute show to honor a man, a physician who just is an incredible. I got to meet Dr. Nick Gonzalez September of 2012. And it was mid June of 2012, when I was asked to leave my conventional practice, and God opened the door for me to start Veritas Medical. And we're not going to get into that story, but one thing, Roby Mitchell, who was the one God used in my life to open my eyes, he told me, you've got to go to some conferences. You've got to go to these integrative kind of conferences to, number one, meet people, get encouraged, find some mentors, and see that there's scientific, evidence-based, published data to support this quote unquote alternative stuff. So I took that to heart. And what more kind of controversial thing could you get into than cancer? And there was a conference, and actually Roby was speaking at it. And come to find out, he really wanted me there just to take his picture up on the stage so he could use it on social media. And that was great. Roby was really good with marketing, but it was an amazing conference. And I met Dr. Nicholas Gonzalez at that conference. And I've asked Dr. Nick's wife, Mary Beth, to come on the show. Dr. Gonzalez passed away. It's his 10-year anniversary of his passing. And I didn't even realize that until I had a colleague reach out to me just recently, even I think it was last week, via email, because she has a malignancy in her colon, and she decided that she wanted to add some complementary and alternative methods to that protocol for her treatment protocol. And she's starting the Gonzalez Protocol. And that just reminded me of that. And she specifically mentioned Mary Beth would be a great guest on your podcast. And I went to the website, and I hadn't been on there in a long time, and saw July 21st, 2025, the 10-year mark. And I just thought, wow, I'm going to reach out. And she's probably not available because she's super busy. She's got a lot going on. She's continuing her husband's work. But before we bring Mary Beth on, I just want to say this show, I think it will encourage everybody. But I have so many physicians, nurse practitioners, and PAs reaching out weekly. I just got off the phone, my 9 o'clock appointment, and this video we're doing at 9:45. And I just got off the phone with a practitioner in Colorado, and it's the same story. She was in urgent care, emergency care medicine for a while, and conventional, and thought, man, this emergency room, it's really chronic disease exacerbation that's going to the ER. I'm going to go into primary care to try to keep people out of the ER. There's a better way to do this than just ER emergency medicine. She got into primary care and has been doing that for a while. And of course, quickly realized, well, all I'm doing in primary care is putting a Band-Aid with a pharmaceutical on a symptom. High sugar, high pressure, acid all that's a symptom. Tumors, those are symptoms of disorder in the body. So she saw that, realized that, and but she doesn't know what to do. Of course, her overseeing physician is conventional, and she's trying to come out of that. Well, Dr. Nicholas Gonzalez is a pioneer, and Mary Beth will tell his story and point to people, men before him, men and women before him. So, it's been a long-standing journey, but now so many practitioners have opened their eyes to the fact there's a better way to take care of people. I just got a text this morning. I didn't, maybe y'all have seen this, but the text was an article from Time Magazine, actually, and I won't read the whole thing, but the title of it is "World's Richest Woman Has Opened a Medical School," and it's about Alice, the Walmart lady, that Sam Walton's sister, I believe it is, who's opening a med school in Arkansas with a more holistic approach because she had a bad experience with conventional medicine, and she said, this system's broken, and I'm going to do what I can to try to fix it. And I don't know much about that school. I just read the article today, but they have gardens, both beautiful gardens and edible gardens. They've got a park on top of the building, on top of the medical schools, a green space and a park. There's walking trails. There's going to be a gym and a wellness center and all this stuff. And I don't know exactly what they'll teach, but the article said they're going to try to teach more of a root cause resolution, which obviously is related to our behavior. Medical school's stuck on biology and not behavior. We need both. And the biology needs to be handled a little more holistically and naturally, not just pharmaceutically. In my opinion, that's another show. I don't want to ramble, but my point is so many people are opening up their eyes to the understanding there's a better way to do things. We're the sickest country getting the worst outcomes, and it's only getting worse by the year. We spend the most money to get the worst outcomes. Our kids are dying, our old people and young, everybody. Cancer's through the roof, autoimmune through the roof. I'm looking at healthcare plans, self-funded healthcare plans with these companies in our corporate wellness side. We're getting to look at the data. $9 million one company's spending, $9 million on just pharmaceuticals for their employees per year. And I look at their top 10 list, the top 4, autoimmune. Drugs to tell the immune system to calm down, shut down, quit attacking self. It's unbelievable the amount of disease and the limited benefit we get from a pharmaceutical approach. With cancer, chemotherapy, last time I looked, it's about anywhere from a 1.8 to 2.1% contribution that chemo does for 5-year survival rate. Not anti-chemo in certain cancers, and Dr. Gonzalez even spoke to this. Certain cancers actually kind of respond to that, but many don't, especially solid tumors. So looking outside the box. So at that conference, my eyes were open. There's a book by Ty Bollinger, Cancer, Think Outside the Box. Ty Bollinger was there. Gerson, Charlotte Gerson was scheduled to be there. She fell the day before and broke her hip. She was 98 years old. And I've had Dr. Vickers on from the Gerson Clinic in the past. And then Dr. Nick Gonzalez, he stood up at this conference, and this is a book, multiple books, The Maverick Doctor, Nutrition and the Autonomic Nervous System. We'll talk about that here in a minute. Conquering Cancer, Volume 1 and 2. So many books and other books too. I know that Mary Beth has even published, and the foundation has. And he signed the book for me. But what was so impressive, he stood up and he was honored at that conference, a distinguished award, and I forget which one, and Mary Beth could probably speak to it here in a minute. But what he did was just present data, case after case after case. And he made the same comment. And every case was a stage 4, metastatic to the brain, to wherever, failed conventional therapy, alive still 20 years, 30 years later. And he would say at the very last sentence of each case, he would say something to the effect of, and I've scoured the medical literature, and I've yet to find any reported case of a 20 or 30 year stage 4 survivor using conventional therapy. But he said it so sweetly, politely, nonchalantly, just factually. And then he'd move to the next case, and he'd go through this whole case, stage 4, metastatic, non-responsive, on hospice. And Miss Smith is alive still today, 25 years later. And he just went case by case by case, and my jaw dropped. And I'm just sitting there, and I called my wife. I said, babe, this guy, Nick Gonzalez, this is unbelievable. And I went right up to him after the talk, and I grabbed the book and opened it up, and I asked him one thing. Well, I asked him a few things, but when I said, what's the one thing you would recommend? I'm just learning. I'm 2 months into this. He's blowing my mind. And I said, what's the one thing that I should take home from it to tell patients of mine? And he said, Ben, in regards to cancer and cancer protocols, the most important thing I can tell you is encourage your patients to pray about what direction to go, including totally conventional, but pray about that, get peace about it, and whatever they decide and they believe in their heart's the way to go, then tell them to go that way 100%, put blinders on and go for it. I was like, whoa, even if it's not your protocol. I mean, that was his heart. He loved people. He loved, from the little bit of interaction, loved people more than anything, pursued the truth, and he knew the patient's heart, and their belief was the driving thing behind it all. You've got to have peace about what you're doing. But Mary Beth could explain all this way better than I can. I just wanted to explain a little bit. And I was a fledgling podcaster back then, actually, as a radio show. And one of my regrets is I never got to have Dr. Nicholas Gonzalez program. But today we have his spouse, his wife, Mary Beth. Mary Beth, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, I'm thrilled to be here, and thank you for inviting me.
You're very welcome. First of all, Mary Beth, I wanted to say we can go any direction you want to go with this. I know you're doing so much, and it was just a 10-year anniversary. I know you've been on a lot of interviews because of the anniversary. There's the foundation that's working. There's the Gonzalez Guardians. Dr. Tony Jimenez has been on the show before, some years ago. So we can go any direction. But my thought for the audience who doesn't know Dr. Nicholas Gonzalez, has never heard of him. We have a lot of new listeners who are coming out of conventional medicine. I was telling you before we hit record, the number one chief complaint we have at our practice now, patients coming in, is I don't trust my doctor. I just need a PCP I can trust. So we have a lot of brand new listeners and patients and wellness members, clients that are really just starting to learn that there's an alternative to the conventional way. And so that's where I was thinking we would go. Is Dr. Gonzalez trained conventional? And then something piqued his interest, and maybe just sharing that story of how he started thinking outside the box and pursuing this. And then we'll just kind of walk through his life as much as we can in this hour.
Terrific. So yes, my late husband was a conventionally trained Ivy League educated medical doctor. He went to Brown University undergraduate, extremely brilliant, Phi Beta Kappa, and he ended up at Cornell Medical School. He actually had applied to every medical school, all the top schools, and he got into all of them. But he decided to go to Cornell because his dad was sick. His dad was dying of cancer, and he was in New York City. And so Nick wanted to stay close to where his dad was. So he went to Cornell Medical School, and he actually went on to become a research scientist at Sloan Kettering. So talk about like being conventional. He's doing bone marrow transplants, and he's working directly under the tutelage of Dr. Robert Good, who was the head of Sloan Kettering at the time and considered to be the father of immunology. So Nick was very conventionally minded. He was going to be a research scientist for the rest of his life, until a journalist friend of his asked him if he would look into the work of Dr. Kelly. So I don't know if your audience knows anything about the eccentric dentist, Dr. William Donald Kelly.
No, give a little bit of history on him.
Sure. So Dr. Kelly was a orthodontist from Grapevine, Texas, and he wrote a book that is essentially called The Cure for, I think it's called, or A Cure for Cancer.
Mm-hmm.
So he wrote a book, and it was based on his own experience with curing his own pancreatic cancer. And he did that by essentially trial and error, trying different nutrients, trying different foods, different detox routines. And he went on, after he cured his own pancreatic cancer in the late 1960s. He treated other people in his town. So you got to imagine this is pretty phenomenal, because here's a orthodontist treating people with cancer. But he got so much success that his doctor friends in Texas, all the guys from the country club, were sending all of their patients to Kelly, because he was getting results. And he was getting results by individually metabolically typing people, which we can talk about in a minute, and designing a customized nutritional program, detox program, and supplement program for them. Well, Dr. Kelly's results became pretty well known, but everybody was just skeptical of what was this true? So Nick's friend asked him to go meet with Dr. Kelly and investigate whether it was true or not. And of course, Nick didn't want to go; he was too busy. But after the third time his friend asked him to go, he went. And sure enough, Nick actually moved into Kelly's home because he was so impressed with the results that he was seeing. He wanted to really dig deep and meet with Kelly's patients and study what it was that Kelly had figured out. And at the time, his mentor, Robert Good, encouraged Nick to do this as kind of a private project. So Nick actually spent 5 years working with Dr. Kelly and meeting with his patients and going through the files. And they would stay up, till all hours of the night talking science. One of Nick's favorite things to do.
Yeah.
And
And wasn't Dr. Good the head of Sloan Kettering Cancer Department at that time?
he was president of all Sloan Kettering at that time.
Okay, so Dr. Good, president of Sloan Kettering, and mentor to Dr. Gonzalez, encouraged Dr. Gonzalez go study under Dr. Kelly.
Exactly. And so Nick's plan was to write a book all about Kelly's success and then be able to help, with Dr. Good's help, get that published. So he wrote up 50 of the most miracle patients he could find from Kelly. And then there were a lot of them. So you can imagine like the top 50 were really amazing. And he wrote up this monograph and he couldn't get it published. Nobody would believe him. None of the publications would believe the results. Or they would write and say, like, if we did publish this, we would get in trouble for doing this. So at that time, Dr. Kelly, who had really opened up his practice and his life to Nick, got very depressed. And it became even harder to work with. He was always kind of a difficult, rather eccentric man. So Nick went back to New York City and opened up his own private practice. And this is now in 1987. And he practiced in New York City for 30 years. And he essentially took what he learned from Kelly in terms of metabolic typing and this theory called the trophoblast model of cancer, which is based on the idea that if you flood the system with pancreatic enzymes, that you can help treat your cancer. That was originally developed by Dr. John Beard. So Nick opened up his practice and used all of the medical know-how and knowledge that he had acquired from Cornell and working at Sloan Kettering, and he advanced what was the Kelly program to make it even more scientific. And his mission all along was, that he knew that this work was true because he could see the results in Kelly's patients, and he just wanted to be able to prove that and share that with as many patients as possible. And I do want to just segue for a minute here and say that Nick was a man who was completely uncompromising. He had an impeccable integrity, very honest. And once he had seen the success of this nutritional program that Kelly had, he couldn't unsee it. He couldn't just go back to doing conventional medicine and doing bone marrow transplants. And so he not only saw it with his eyes, but he saw it with his heart. And Dr. Gonzalez was a man of very deep faith, and he was led to this work by the Lord. And Nick would start the first hour of every single morning, no matter where he was in the world, reading his Bible. And he believed that his work here on earth was to be a servant of God, and that this nutritional work was the way that he was serving and healing people. So pretty unique. And what I know from talking to so many of his patients over the years is that he brought this high level of compassion and belief in the body's ability to heal itself, but also belief in the patient's ability to cure themselves by following the different protocols that he designed.
Mm-hmm. When did you and how did you discover Nicholas Gonzalez?
Well, I'd like to say I met Nick the only way one could possibly meet Nick, and that was in his office. So I wasn't a patient, but I was advocating for one of my brother's new mother-in-law. who was dying of stomach cancer. And she was in a charity hospital in Albany. And he was telling me the story of how they just were convinced that conventional medicine um, wasn't going to work for her, and because they'd already tried it and they didn't know what else to do. So I put on my fix it hat and I started Googling and trying to figure out, well, I live in New York City. And I'm going to just find the best doctor in New York City who can help her. And I kept finding this name, Nick Gonzalez, over and over again in on the internet. So I called the office and I started telling my story, and they said, "Well, the patient has to apply. Here's the process, and as soon as we get her records and her application, we can the doctor will get back to her." And I said, "Well, wait, you don't have that kind of time. Like we're really in a rush here." And they said, "Well, that's the way it works, and thank you very much." Well, I thought we could do better. So the next day on my lunch hour, I showed up at Nick's office, and um, Nick, he would spend a very long time with all of his patients, like 2, 3 hours. And they came in from all over the world. So he didn't have the kind of office where there was like a revolving door and you couldn't just like walk right in. You had to be buzzed in, and there wasn't really anyone ever waiting in the waiting room. So I just happened to get off the elevator when a patient was walking out. So I walked right in. I didn't know, of course, that like that wasn't something you did. I um, so I walked in, and there's Nick standing there, and he looks at me and he goes, "What are you doing here?" Because he knew I wasn't his next patient, and I basically was some stranger who had just walked into his office. So I started telling my story about how I was here to help my brother's mother-in-law, and Nick listened, and we're standing there in the waiting room, and his receptionist is listening too. And I, I ended the story by saying, "Well, do you think you can help?" And he says, "Well, I certainly would like to try." He said, "Why don't you leave your information with the receptionist, and um, I will call you this afternoon, and we'll get together for dinner, and we'll talk more about it." And then he turned on his heels and walked down the hall. I said, "Wait, did that just happen?" he wants to talk to me over dinner, like this adorable doctor. Like, what is going on here? Like, is this how he gets patients? It didn't make any sense. So we got together for dinner 2 days later, and we fell in love. Um, and it really was a God deal, as he and I would often say, that God brought us together, because just 2 days after that date, my brother's mother-in-law died. So there was a very short window of time by which I would have been advocating for her, and we could have met. Um, and so, so that's the story. And um, it was like a 4 or 5 hour dinner. And I
Wow.
remember getting in the cab on my way home and calling my boyfriend and breaking up with him on the phone.
Wow. Love at first sight.
Yes, and then Nick and I were engaged 6 weeks later,
Wow.
married for 15 years.
Yeah. So as you walked with him in those 15 years, could you shed a little light on, you've already mentioned his integrity, his compassion for patients, but just thinking about especially the state of modern medicine, conventional medicine, just what we've been through the past 5 years, I think highlighted and opened so many people's eyes. But what would you say set him apart, or you would encourage other physicians, medical students? I didn't mention Alice Walton opening that medical school. She's going to pay for the tuition of the first, not only the first class, but the first 5 years of medical school students going through that new medical school. But to those, those medical students, if you were running that medical school or had any input on, what were the qualities, what were some of the things that you saw in those 15 years of being, you lived with you 24/7, you're with them, shed some light for those medical students who are maybe listening.
Well, what I learned from Nick was a model for how to be a doctor that really worked. So in fact, I used some of those same attributes that I witnessed when we set up our own foundation and a curriculum to teach doctors how to do the Gonzalez Protocol. And one of the most important things was that they had to have the intellect. This is a it's a whole new way of thinking about medicine. And in fact, when we created a 750-page textbook and 10 days of instruction, and we had some medical doctors learning this work as well as naturopaths who had gone to 4-year schools here in the United States. And then we had some rigorous testing. And I share all this because at the end, there were several doctors who didn't even pass the test. It's that hard. So you have to really put your predisposed ideas of medicine or what you think you were taught in medical school aside, and look at this new way. And you also need to have patience and compassion and be able to be on this healing team with the patient. And what I mean by that is bring the patient in. It's not like you're not a dictator. You're not you're not the general. You're a part of their healing team, and they need to feel like you got skin in the game too. One of the things that have resonated the most for me from some of the tributes that we've seen on our website over the last week or so were the people who would talk about how they didn't just learn about science from Nick and learn about how the body worked, but of course they did. But they also learned about how to pick themselves up when they were down, and how to be encouraged, and how to have hope and have faith. You were talking earlier, Ben, about the importance of deciding. Nick saying you need to decide which program you want to do and then do it 100%. That was his mantra. Like, don't do this 50% because it's a waste of your time and it's not going to work. So whatever program you believe in, you need to do that 100%. So the doctor who's on this team with the patient and their family, oftentimes helping the patient to actually execute the program in terms of like the juicing and the food and the detox. It's complicated. So you need a team of folks helping you. The doctor really needs to be compassionate and hold their hand. And so those are some of the things that we looked for when we brought in guardians. We call them the Gonzalez Guardians. So they're guarding and protecting this work so it doesn't get watered down and changed over time to the point where it doesn't work anymore. We do change it as needed to advance it. Like we started adding infrared saunas to our program, which weren't around 10 years ago, right? But we all know about the healing benefits of those. So it was important when we looked for the doctors that are now doing this work, call them the Gonzalez Guardians. And I'm just thrilled to say that the doctors that we've continued to work with after the educational seminar a couple of years ago are doing a beautiful job. And the patients that they are seeing are telling the same kind of stories about their new doctor that I used to hear and continue to hear about Nick.
That is so awesome. I know he would be so proud of what you're doing and the whole team. But it takes a leader to step up and continue his legacy. So thank you for that and what you're doing. It's amazing.
I do want to acknowledge that it is a team. And I was a business leader for many years in New York City, and So I knew it was important to surround myself with people that were smarter than me. And
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't a doctor. But all of a sudden, overnight, I inherited his medical practice. I inherited his unpublished books. I inherited, 300 boxes of files, his baseball card collection, all this stuff. And I needed people to help me. And so we have a wonderful group of devoted past patients and colleagues who are part of the Nicholas Gonzalez Foundation, and then now taking a next step further with the doctors who are actually seeing patients.
Hey, everybody, quick break from the show. I've got something really special to share with you. I'm so excited to introduce You're the Cure, a self-paced 9-module online video program we've been prayerfully and passionately building here at Veritas. And this isn't just another wellness program, it's a movement of truth, transformation, and hope. And I truly believe it has the power to change your life. It's designed to help you uncover the root causes of what you're facing and walk in true healing. I'll be guiding you along with other members of the Veritas team as we return to God's original design for your health. Through simple, powerful tools focused on nutrition, hydration, movement, and peace, you'll gain clarity, confidence, and lasting transformation. The journey is yours to take because the truth is you are the cure. Head over to veritaswellnessmember.com to get access today. Become a Veritas Wellness member now and get $100 off the program. Guys, I'm just so excited about this. After 20 years of practicing medicine, it's boiled down into this. This is the core of what you need to truly be well. So we'll see you in the program. Well, we don't have to go deep into this, Mary Beth, but you did just mention, kind of suddenly overnight, all this sort of landed right in your lap. And it has been 10 years now, and it took some time to process through all that and get things going. But obviously people will ask me or wonder, what happened with Dr. Gonzalez and what led to his death. And again, I want to be respectful of you and of him, and as much as you want to get into that or not. But he did. It was a unexpected and quick passing. Do we know, or the circumstances of that?
So the short answer is we don't know. And it was incredibly shocking to all of us, and his own doctors, his colleagues, and I was there. He just collapsed in the bathroom, and I found him on the floor in our home, and we just had a normal night up until then. I made his dinner. He always got home a little bit later than I did, so I usually would eat my own dinner, and then I'd have it ready for him when he got home. And I remember I made his favorite salmon and 3 vegetables: broccoli, carrots, and cauliflower. And so when he died, when he collapsed, I didn't know that he had passed away. I didn't know what was going on. So I immediately called 911, and we lived right around the corner from the Cornell hospital, and they were there right away. And we did several autopsies, 2 sets of autopsies over the course of a long period of time. There were a lot of different theories, but we do not know what happened.
Well, I'm so sorry. I know, even though it's 10 years, that it in many ways probably seems like yesterday, and still a special place in your heart, I know, and that you miss him so much, I'm sure. But like I said, his legacy lives on, the work lives on. He was such a man of science, of research, of integrity, and wanting to prove what he was doing. And the fact that you've published books that were on his computer, and you've published case studies, and you've got a training program that intense I heard you on another interview, I think 10 months of study before the 10-day course and then the test and the 750-page book. And some doctors don't even pass. I mean, the rigor and the integrity and the scientific method that you've, and these other guardian doctors, it's awesome what you've continued. And I know he'd be so proud.
Thank you. Um, I I had this first front row seat to the miracles that Nick was performing, um, and I knew that he needed help in his lifetime, and we was a frequent conversation in our home about how he needed to bring on some more people. He needed to train some doctors. He couldn't continue to be working, the hours that he worked, um, and that he needed to be able to pass on the work. And of course, Nick was going to live till he was 100, and he kept saying to me, like, well, I have some people come through my office over the years, um, but I really need to focus on my patients, and I need to focus on my research. And this is what you say when you're perfectly healthy, right? You aren't worried about your legacy and your succession plan. But what we did talk about is how it would take a certain type of person to be able to do this work. And so I was fortunate that I knew that after he passed, that we needed to look for a, a special type of doctor. Now, I also knew that those books of his were really important. He spent 4 or 5 years writing up these cases, and he'd written 120 cases when he died. Now he was trying to write 125 of these, his best cancer case reports. And I just kept saying to him, well, don't you think 120 is enough? Like, that's a lot. That's a lot more than the book that you did about Dr. Kelly, because he ended up publishing that book that nobody else would publish. And it's called One Man Alone, and it's 50 cases. I think, so 120 is a lot more than 50. Shouldn't we just get this out there?
Yeah.
And he would look at me like, okay, just not yet, not yet. So one of the first things that I did with this team of colleagues who also worked on my board at that time was to review the work he'd already written up so we could get him published. So you showed some of the books earlier, Ben. We did a Conquering Cancer book series. That's volume 2 that you're showing. So those are 19 different types of cancer and 62 cases. And then the first book, volume 1, is pancreatic cancer and breast cancer. And there are 50 cases there. And what you'll hear in those in Nick's words in these cases is about the progression of the disease and like how they came to do the protocol, and he documents scientifically how sick they were, and then he talks about their success in the program. What you're not going to see is like a whole protocol of exactly what that patient did to get well.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that. And we talked about that a lot at home. It would be very misleading to publish what one patient did, because it's never the same thing for every patient. And you could really mislead people who read about these breast cancer patients and think, oh, all I have to do is what I read in that book, because that's not what it is. And even two people with this exact same disease are going to be on a different protocol. And so some people get upset that we haven't published exactly what needs to get done, but that's why we wrote the course and did the seminar. And it really did take a lot of time to learn how to individualize a program, which is, the way I knew Nick would want it to be done. So that's what we did.
Talk a little bit about, and really probably this is the book that I bought at the conference, What Went Wrong, that he signed. But this You kind of touched on it when he originally saw Dr. Kelly's work, was trying to get those 50 cases published. All the publishers said no, basically. His desire to have someone in the conventional world, whether it be a cancer center or a leading journal, but someone in that conventional realm, um, accept see the work, accept the work, be able to prove that out. And then, this clinical trial that they were doing, um, that seemed to be so important to him. And can you speak to that? And did he come to a place of just realizing that system's not going to accept this, or the people that do are just going to have to get out of that system, or kind of what were his thoughts in regard to that and that system?
Well, Nick was a research scientist at Sloan Kettering, so we talked about that already, right? So like that was in his heart, that he always wanted to document his work, and he sought to have this new work, the Gonzalez Protocol work, clinically tested. It wasn't enough to just be having miracle cases. He really wanted it to be rigorously tested because he knew that it was true, and he wanted to be able to prove it scientifically and have other people prove it. And he actually was very critical of other alternative therapies that didn't want to have this type of scientific scrutiny. Um, and so, in that way, he was kind of an island. Here he was, this alternative medicine doctor, but he really wanted orthodox medicine's um, approval, so to speak. Well, so he aggressively went out looking for grants, and he got one from the National Institute of Health and the National Cancer Institute, which was unheard of back then. That alternative therapies were being tested by those organizations, and because he knew that the work was true and that the results were honest and accurate, he thought they would just be so impressed. And he was a little bit naive, and he didn't realize how the deck was totally stacked against him, and how, and that book that you just raised, Ben, What Went Wrong, is the story that of where Nick used his journalistic skills, and he documented all the scientific bias and the incredible corruption that went on during the clinical trial, grossly mismanaged by the academicians who were in charge of the study. And um, that book, he took a lot of heat for it, but he said, like, we have to tell the truth, and people need to know. Um, he won the Independent Book Publishers Silver Award for that book. So he did get, at least in the publishing world, some acknowledgement. But it's always been our goal to be able to redo that pancreatic cancer clinical trial, because the original data um, is really meaningless because of the corruption and the sabotage. Um, but I got to tell you, I don't know that we would even trust it being redone today. So that's why he spent all of his time telling his story through his books in all these cases. Um, and and there's another book that he wrote. I'm going to turn around and pick it up for a second here. This is kind of a funny story. Oh, can you see it? Flip it around.
Here too.
Oh, you do. Okay, great.
Yeah.
So, um, so I mentioned that I inherited like 300 boxes of Nick's files, but I also inherited all his computers. And um, I found these random files in his computers were like really like poorly labeled, something that only made sense in his head. But I started reading what was the Word documents that were in these files, and I thought, wait, this is work I've never read before. He's never published this in a journal article, um, or on any website. And I thought, this sounds really important. It's all about the autonomic nervous system and understanding like how you bring people into balance. And um, So I shared it with some of the doctors that are working with me, and they said, "Wow, you need to publish this and put everything else aside. This is the book that you need to get published right away." So that's how that book came to be, and it ended up winning the Book Excellence Award, International Award, and it's an international bestseller, and it's one of those books that both lay people and scientists can understand, and a lot of people, tell me it's their favorite book. So I encourage people to, if they're interested in this work and want to learn more, that's one place I would start.
Yeah. Yeah, it is fascinating, guys. Nutrition and the autonomic nervous system. And our listeners and my clients and patients know that I talk a lot about the autonomic nervous system, autopilot, and how, and then to me, this is where the spiritual part comes in and the individuality. Because to be walking in true peace, and therefore that autonomic nervous system being balanced, and therefore all these systems like the immune system, the digestive system can work properly, the endocrine system, fight or flight versus rest and digest. In a chronic state of fight or flight, a chronic state of not at ease or dis-ease, is not compatible with health. And and I talk about this all the time, and I'll just get your thoughts, Mary Beth. But I tell people you cannot diet, supplement, and exercise your way to health. Those are important. You need to do that. You need to steward the physical, but this deeper and this spiritual aspect and this autonomic nervous system, that's where the interplay comes in the physical and the non-physical, that invisible realm, and our beliefs, our heart beliefs, our thoughts that drive, fight or flight versus rest and digest, but how even certain foods can encourage that to tip out of balance, that autonomic nervous system. So that's a piece to this that's so interesting and unique, and I think sets the protocol apart from a lot of other protocols that obviously, like the Gerson. I mean, I love Gerson, I love a lot, and Nick pulled from Gerson the juicing, the coffee enemas, but the pancreatic enzymes you mentioned earlier, Dr. Beard, it's all these kind of put together. But this metabolic approach, as far as which foods kind of impact the nervous system, is just truly fascinating. But kind of give me your thoughts on. I know you mentioned Nick started his day reading the Bible, and spirituality was and his faith were a big part. But kind of what's your thoughts, and your observation of how important it is, beyond just eating the right foods to balance that autonomic nervous system?
Well, one of the things that I learned from Nick is that, um, one of the reasons why it's so important to how to lead a spiritual life is not just because, God's in charge, right? And we know that ultimately, with this, why we're doing all of this is for Him.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's because your body needs to be detoxed, from your negative feelings and your negative emotions, and just like we detox our body, from certain uh, things that are in our lives like EMFs and certain foods, and we try to just live as clean a life as we can from a detox perspective. We need to do the same with our spirit, and it's it's interesting because some people, um, have noted how people who are too parasympathetic, and those are the people that are on the extreme, um, that they actually need to be, let's call it, heightened up, and alerted and actually made angry so that they can become more balanced. And Dr. Kelly actually gave a lecture once about how he was helping a patient who was severely parasympathetic dominant, and his advice was, I want you to go watch, horror movies. I want you to go watch action movies and get yourself in that state of anxiety because you're just too flat. you're just too relaxed. And this is the opposite of what they teach people often in other alternative medicine programs, where they just say, relax, go to the beach, take in the sun, and think nice thoughts. Well, the opposite in this case is what Kelly said should be done for those parasympathetic dominant people. So, Nick didn't, go tell his leukemia patients to watch horror movies, but you understand the point. And it's something that we're seeing more and more emotional trauma with patients today than, say, 10 years ago. Let's face it, there's a lot of things that have changed in our world, even in the last 5 years. And the anxiety that people have and the lack of trust that they have. You talked earlier, Ben, about people not necessarily trusting their doctor. That's just incredibly stressful. And one of the ways through that is to, have faith, and have faith that God is going to help put the right plan in front of you, that you just need to listen for the signals, and then walk through that door. We did a show yesterday where we brought on some of our current patients. And I always like to ask them, like, how did they find this program? And several of them said that it was like seeds were just planted in different places where they just kept seeing the Gonzalez Protocols, that name, or they would see Dr. Nick's name. And these are just different ways that the Lord plants these seeds. And they realize that they've seen it enough times that they needed to look into it.
Wow. Well, let's we have probably 10 more minutes left or so. And I kind of want to talk some about the protocol, but I also want to give time to talk about the current work, all the different websites, ways that people can continue to follow, support, learn more. But one part we didn't really go into that might, if people heard it earlier, might have piqued an interest. You mentioned pancreatic enzymes. You mentioned Dr. Beard, the trophoblastic theory of cancer. Can you just sort of in a nutshell touch on that? What did Dr. Beard, John Beard, discover? And I think that's in the 1800s, maybe. And just that whole, why would pancreatic enzymes be a part in that? I know that's could be a huge question, but sort of just touch on that briefly before we kind of start to wrap things up.
Sure. So back in 1911, so more than 100 years ago, a Scottish embryologist named John Beard, he was a professor at the University of Edinburgh in Scotland, and he was incredibly meticulous, this scientist, and he came up with this theory that pancreatic enzymes could be a treatment for cancer. And the way he came about that is that he was studying embryos. And what he noticed is that an adult stem cell, which we call them today, is actually this trophoblast. It's come from the placenta, and that what is happening with cancer is that those stem cells have lost their regulatory signal, and it's therefore like a wayward trophoblast around the body. But if you add pancreatic enzymes into the system, it can actually re-regulate and properly differentiate those trophoblast cells so that they stop replicating in the embryo and halt cancer progression. So, I'm not a scientist. That's the way I explain it, to lay people. There's several books about this theory. Beard wrote his own book, The Enzyme Theory of Cancer, which Nick republished. And then Nick went on to write a book called The Trophoblasts and the Origins of Cancer. So this is all well documented in those books. But ultimately, the theory is that a special type of pancreatic enzymes, they have to be activated enzymes. Um, and so Nick worked with a supplement company to offer those, are one of the ways that we treat cancer.
Yeah. And I did read that book years ago, and I don't remember the detail, but one part of it, basically when an embryo is developing, at this certain day, the pancreas basically kicks in, the embryonic pancreas, and just starts making these enzymes, and it shuts down that trophoblastic, that kind of that not out of control, but that rapid replication gets on that day stops, but in correlation with when the pancreas starts producing enzymes. And so that was part of Dr. Beard's observation, and theory was based on that actual observation, um, as an embryo is developing. It's fascinating.
Well, it's been one of the priority projects of mine for the last 6 months to be able to offer those enzymes that Nick made freely to everybody, um, not just not just patients, but any consumer and practitioner. So we started on our Gonzalez Guidance website, which we launched in June. There's a special section for consumers and for practitioners, and you can actually get those pancreatic enzymes that Dr. Nick created, that he used, in his practice for 30 years, and we've been using now for the last 10 years. And it's the only place in the world where you're able to get those enzymes.
Yeah, yeah, it's got to be the right ones, very specific ones. So, what is the best way, Mary Beth, for people to find all that, find a Gonzalez Guardian doctor, just learn more, find the books, and just support you and continue to follow you, the different websites, or if you have social media?
So we tend to stay off social media, honestly, because we just don't have a team that can man it and field all the questions. So we have 3 websites. Um, the website for the foundation is called the Gonzalez Protocol, and that's where you're going to see all types of research and educational information about the work, as well as an application that you would fill out if you wanted to actually meet with one of our doctors. Uh, and there's an application process then, because we don't claim that we can help everybody. And we also want to make it clear that anybody who does this protocol is going to be actively involved in their own healing. And so they need to be able to fully understand what that entails. And so we go through that in the application process with them, so that nobody is surprised when they show up in a doctor's office that they need to do coffee enemas twice a day. So that's on the foundation's website, and there's also a section there if people are interested in donating to help us continue our work. Then the second website is gonzalezguidance.com, and that's where we not only have the glandular products that Dr. Gonzalez developed, but we also have a Gonzalez metabolic type test. This was one of the things that we did early on with the foundation. Is so many people were saying to me, I just want to know what to eat. I don't have cancer. I don't need to see a doctor. I just want to be smarter about my diet. So we took a original test that was done by Dr. Kelly, and I worked with the Dr. Kelly team, and we created a test that's only 100 questions, and it's all done online. And at the end of answering these multiple choice questions, you receive an individualized diet for that metabolic type. And the diet is exactly the same as what Nick wrote. It's just prettier. And I designed it so it's a little bit easier to digest, visually. And so that's available on the GonzalezGuidance.com website. And then we now have 9 books. So the website to find those books is called newspringpress.com. All of them are also available on Amazon, but you can see them all at newspringpress.com, and a couple of Nick's DVDs from lectures he's given are there. And it's our plan to publish the results from the Gonzalez Guardians, and some of the patients that we had on the show yesterday will be a part of those cases that we plan to publish. But it's going to be a couple of years. You need to wait several years to be able to demonstrate that the protocol is successful with a patient. Nick, early in his career, wrote up a bunch of his cases after just 6 years of practice. And that book is another book I published. It's called Proof of Concept. And that's 25 of his best cases that he presented to the National Cancer Institute early in his practice. So we're going to follow that model. And after 6 years, we're going to be able to publish our own cases.
Wow. That's awesome. And just thinking of all the people, all the patients, all the families, all the loved ones that y'all are touching and bringing hope to. It's just amazing. And I love how Dr. Gonzalez, learned from Dr. Beard, from Dr. Kelly, incorporated other successful pieces of other protocols like the juicing with Gerson I mentioned earlier, and stayed true to the right kind of enzymes, and then stayed true to the scientific method and trying to publish. He is such an example, like I mentioned earlier, for medical students, for my fellow colleagues, for other scientists, to put the patient first, number one. Love your patient, love your neighbor as much as you love yourself. Love God. Jesus said, you do those three, you got it. Everything else falls into place. And I think Nick really exemplified those three things that Jesus said to do. And it showed the fruit of his life is quite evident. And so although, he did pass early and for unknown reasons, like you said, his impact was more than most men's times. I don't know how many numbers, the impact that this one man had in a life that we say was shortened, but God works it all for the good. And it's amazing to see the ripple effect and the impact that you're continuing his legacy. So thank you for all you're doing.
Somebody said to me the other day that, not that anybody would have wanted Nick to pass, but because he did, this work has advanced that much more, because now all these books have been published, and we've expanded the doctor team. This is all stuff that Nick wanted to be able to do, but he was so busy seeing his own patients, he just didn't have enough time. He was all by himself.
Yeah.
So we now have this team that, he wasn't able to put together in his lifetime, but they all rallied in its passing, so that we can now offer this work all around the world. We have the doctors that we work with are only a couple of them are based in the U.S.
Yeah.
So it's helped take the work to the next level and help more people. And one of the things that I want to acknowledge is that, Nick used to always say when he was feeling down, because believe me, it wasn't an easy road, the path that he took, is that if God wants this work to succeed, it will. And that gave him the permission to try new things. And it certainly gave me permission to try things that I'd never done before. I'd never written a book or published a book or led a curriculum and run a foundation. But God is right here helping us, and Nick is right here by my side too.
Yes, he is. Well, thank you, Mary Beth. I know sometimes these are hard things to talk about, but you do it with grace and elegance and integrity, just like Nick. So thank you for that. Thank you for being with us today. And everybody, thank y'all for joining us. And this program will be on all the platforms like it always is, and it'll be archived on our website, veritaswellnessmember.com. Please share it far and wide. Our hope is that we can educate people. The name of the show is You're the Cure. And knowledge is powerful, and walking in the truth is what will allow this body to function like God intended it to function. So please share it with your loved ones and not wait for the bomb to go off, so to speak. We don't have to wait for these diagnoses to just land. These lit fuses happen 10, 20 years before, and there's a way to get upstream and snip these fuses before the bomb goes off. So that's why we're doing what we're doing, and I know why Mary Beth's doing what she's doing. So please help us share this far and wide. Okay, everybody, we'll be back next week with another great show. Thanks again, Mary Beth.
Thank you.